Hello everybody, I'm your ghost with the most and your fabulous host Luke here, and I'm making another Ninjago video. Shut the fuck up, Shackle. Anyway, Ninjago Crystallized is one of the worst things I have ever watched. It's bad, and it's a complete dumpster fire with baffling story writing decisions, and I wish the show had ended at Seabound, but unfortunately, that's not the case. One of the many things in the seasons that I didn't like is the Vengestone Buyer. The Vengestone Buyer is something that has been built up throughout the show for many years, and Crystallized finally gave us the answer to who it was, and suffice to say, I don't like who it was. It was Harumi. I was admittedly genuinely surprised Harumi was the buyer. Apparently everyone else saw it coming, but I guess I'm just stupid because I didn't. Now, I could explain to you how Crystallized completely butchered Harumi's character, and they never should have brought her back because her story was fine where it ended in Season 9, but I don't really feel like getting into that right now. So I'm just going to explain to you who I think the buyer should have been. Now, I personally have two ideas for who I think the buyer should have been. The first one is Pythor. I was so certain the buyer was going to be Pythor. It just made sense. Pythor hadn't been seen on screen since Day of the Departed, and in the story since Pythor's Revenge, which is a canon book that apparently no one cares about. He had been absent from the series for so long, so him being revealed to be the buyer the whole time would have been a great comeback. Plus, it would have made sense. He can turn invisible, so he could always just be stalking the ninja, and they would have never suspected a thing. Also, after knowing the Crystal King is the Overlord, it would make even more sense. Pythor has worked with the Overlord in the past, like he did in Rebooted. Pythor did end up coming back in Crystallized, but he wasn't the buyer, and he barely did anything, and he probably could have been cut out from the season entirely, and barely anything would have changed. Pythor deserved better than that. Also, I thought it was really weird that Pythor didn't mention once in Crystallized that he had already worked with the Overlord before. Also, can I just say, Pythor's return in Crystallized was so anticlimactic. He hadn't been seen since Day of the fucking Departed. Do you know how many seasons have passed since then? Him just coming back, already being imprisoned because he was captured off-screen by the new ninja, is the lamest possible thing they could have done. I swear. One day, I'm going to make an entire 6-hour video about why Crystallized is so horrible, but today is not that day. There is one more person that I think should have been the buyer, someone that absolutely no one would have saw coming but would have made complete sense. Fujijov. Just kidding, he sucks ass, and he's super annoying and Crystallized for reasons I'm not going to go into right now, and he's probably the worst Ninjago character ever created. Wow, I seriously need to make that 6-hour Crystallized video. Anyway, the person I am talking about is a serpentine, just like Pythor. Think all the way back to Rise of the Snakes. Think about all the most iconic serpentine. There's Scales and Pythor and... Actually, there really aren't that many memorable serpentine. Well, I guess there's Aspira, but she's memorable for all the wrong reasons.
Revenge! 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 Hot button popcorn, that's a deal! Yeah.
Anyway, think back to the very first episode of the show. Who was the first serpentine we ever saw?
So far away from home, little one.
That's not Scales, that is Slithera, and he should have been the Vengestone Buyer. Think about it. Lloyd made him his slave, and because of that, he lost his position as general to Scales. Slithera was never even given a name in the show, not even in the credits. He was just only named as Hypnobride General, but according to the Ninjago wiki, his name is Slithera, so I'm just gonna go with it. I always thought it was weird how Slithera just completely disappeared from the show after the first 2 episodes of Season 1. Okay, well, I guess he technically appeared in the background a few times, and he talked in the Rebooted finale, and he had Scales' voice for some reason.
People of Ninjago, follow me!
So where am I going with this? Well, it would make complete sense for Slithera to want revenge on Lloyd for making him his slave and losing his place as general because of him. It could be stated that after he lost to Scales in episode 2, he was bullied relentlessly by the other Serpentine, even after they reformed in the Stone Army's tomb. He eventually couldn't take it anymore, and he finally snapped and set out to get revenge on the ninja, specifically Lloyd. I always thought it was weird that considering the rest of the Hypnobride knew that Slithera was hypnotized by Lloyd, that they didn't just unhypnotize him. The anti-venom is literally in the staff. I mean, I guess they didn't have the staff at the end of episode 1, but they get it back in episode 2. They could have just unhypnotized him. Then again, I guess Scales wanted to be general, so I guess that could be why. Did they even ever unhypnotize him? I feel like they had to, otherwise that would be really messed up. Although I'm assuming that he eventually did become unhypnotized for this video. Maybe Slitherer could also want revenge on Scales for taking his place as general, and he could kidnap Selma and Scales Jr. Just an idea. I also know that you could make the argument that Slitherer wouldn't be evil anymore because he helped evacuate the people in the rebooted finale, but you could just chalk that him to not reaching his breaking point yet. Also, have you ever thought about how Lloyd single-handedly is responsible for almost every single horrible thing that happens in the show? If Lloyd had never released the Serpentine, the Great Devourer never would have been released, meaning the Stone Army would have never come to life, meaning the Overlord would have never been a problem, meaning the Digital Overlord never would have been a problem, meaning the Ninja would have never had to go to Chen's Island, and the Cursed Realm would have never needed to be opened, and then Mara would have never escaped. That would have meant the Preeminent never would have escaped, meaning that Klaus never would have escaped, and Klaus would have never found the Teapot of Tyran, although technically the events of Skybound were undone, so I guess it doesn't really count. And then also, if Lloyd had never released the Serpentine, the Great Devourer never would have been released, and Harumi's parents would still have been alive. The show has never really pointed any of this out before. Harumi mentioned in Season 8 that the ninja have failed to stop a bunch of evils, but she never mentioned how literally all of it is Lloyd's fault. And I feel like Slitherer would be the perfect antagonist to bring this up. What if Slitherer pointed all of this out to Lloyd? Think about how cool that would be. Think about all the drama that could come from it. It would make sense for Slitherer to do it too. It all started with him, didn't it? Slitherer should have been the buyer. It would have made complete sense and literally no one would have saw it coming. It would have been a great plot twist. Pythor is the obvious choice, but he wouldn't have been a bad choice. But Slitherer has so much potential. But the writers didn't choose either of them, and they chose Harumi for God knows what reason. Well, that's my take on who the Vengestone Buyer should have been. Now, if you will excuse me, I'm gonna go write my Slitherer x Jace Norman fanfic. Also, can we just talk about the fact that Harumi's parents would still be alive if Misako and Garmadon never had sex?